It's strange how certain memories carve themselves so deeply into your mind that even years later, they feel more vivid than the moment you're living right now. For me, that memory begins with a clock. A simple, ticking wall clock in my living room. It was a Thursday night, January 4th. I remember because I kept staring at that clock, willing the hands to move faster, waiting for the sound of keys rattling at the door, waiting for her footsteps to echo in the hallway. But the only sound in that room was the clock, tick-tock, tick-tock, and the sound of my own breathing that kept getting louder as my chest tightened with worry. 3 days, she had been gone for 3 days. No calls, no texts, no explanation, just vanished. My wife, Emily. If you'd told me 5 years earlier that I'd ever be sitting in that kind of silence, drowning in anxiety about where she was, I would have laughed it off. Emily was my anchor, or at least, that's what I thought back then. I met her in 2016, right after the Cubs won the World Series. I was still buzzing from that, like half of Chicago was, and we'd all convinced ourselves life was on some kind of upswing. I was 29, working a steady job in IT support at a mid-sized firm in the Loop, and spending my weekends in bars with friends who all had the same predictable routine: too much beer, too many shots, and Uber rides home we could barely afford. Emily wasn't like anyone else in my circle. I met her at a friend's New Year's Eve party. She was wearing this dark green dress that looked like it had been made for her alone. She laughed easily, but not in the fake way people do at parties. Her laugh had this low, genuine tone, like she really meant it. That night we talked about everything from indie bands to British crime shows, and when the clock struck midnight I found myself kissing her without even thinking about it. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't forced. It just happened, like we'd both known it was supposed to. By 2018 we were married. A simple ceremony at a little chapel just outside the city, nothing extravagant. I didn't have the money for some huge affair, and Emily swore she didn't care. We spent our honeymoon in Nashville, listening to live country music even though neither of us really liked country that much. But it was fun, it was us. We made promises to each other the way everyone does, forever, no matter what, through thick and thin. At the time I believed it with every fiber of my being. Our life wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We had a small condo in Lincoln Park with creaky floors and windows that let in too much of the winter wind, but it felt warm because she was in it. Mornings were filled with coffee smells and her humming while she got ready for work. Evenings were Netflix and takeout, or cooking together in the kitchen, laughing at how badly I chopped onions. On Sundays we'd drive out to her parents' house in Evanston and sit through long dinners filled with stories I'd already heard 10 times. But it was fine. It was family. For a long time I thought I had everything I'd ever wanted, but looking back now, I realize how blind I was. The first cracks started small, almost invisible if you didn't know where to look. I remember one night in late 2019, December 2nd to be exact, because that's the night she first lied to me. It was something minor. She told me she was working late, but later when I looked at her phone on the counter, I saw an Instagram story of her with some co-workers at a bar downtown. I confronted her about it, and she brushed it off, said she didn't want me to worry or feel left out. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "It was nothing, babe, don't overthink it." I let it go. God, I wish I hadn't. Then the pandemic hit in 2020, and like everyone else, our world shrank down to the four walls of our home. At first it was almost nice, like the world had given us this unexpected pause. We made sourdough bread like everyone else, binge-watched Tiger King, FaceTimed friends with wine glasses in hand. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. Emily grew restless. She started pacing the apartment, scrolling endlessly on her phone, sighing like the walls were suffocating her. I'd suggest board games, movies, walks by the lake, but she'd brush me off saying she was too tired, too stressed, too over it. I told myself it was just the pandemic. Everyone was struggling, but deep down I felt this unease, like something was slipping between my fingers. And then came the work trips. In October 2020, Emily started a new job at a marketing firm, and with it came occasional travel. At first it made sense. Her firm had clients in New York and LA, and sometimes she'd be gone for a night or two. She always came back with little souvenirs, a mug from JFK Airport, a keychain from LAX. She'd tell me funny stories about coworkers and late-night dinners with clients. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but there was always this edge in her voice, this flicker in her eyes when I asked too many questions. The first time she disappeared without explanation was December 2020. She said she was going to visit her friend Jessica in Milwaukee for the weekend. I texted Jessica on Sunday, just casually asking if Emily had left yet, and Jessica's reply chilled me. Wait, Emily never came here. I confronted Emily that night when she got back, and she snapped at me like I'd just accused her of something unforgivable. She said Jessica must have been confused, that maybe I misread the text, and she flipped the whole thing back on me, accusing me of not trusting her. I remember lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was wrong, that I'd misunderstood, that she loved me, but something inside me knew. So when she disappeared for 3 days in January 2021, I wasn't just worried, I was terrified, not just for her safety, but for what the truth might be. I kept pacing that apartment, calling her phone over and over, sending texts that went unanswered. I called her parents, her friends, even her boss, but no one knew where she was. Every night I sat in that living room with the TV on low, the clock ticking louder with every passing hour, and my mind spiraling through every possibility: accident, abduction, or the one I couldn't bring myself to admit yet, because deep down, I already feared the truth. And when it finally came out, it broke me in ways I didn't know were possible. The second night without Emily was the hardest. By then, the initial adrenaline of panic had faded, and what replaced it was this heavy, suffocating dread that sat on my chest like a weight I couldn't shake off. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at the indentation her body had left in the mattress, the faint smell of her perfume still clinging to the sheets. It was that vanilla and jasmine mix she'd worn for years, and for a moment I buried my face into the pillow just to breathe it in as if it might calm me. Instead, it made me feel like I was already mourning her, like she was gone for good. I went through all the motions, filed a missing persons report after 48 hours, talked to the Chicago PD officer who looked at me with that practiced blend of empathy and detachment, like they'd seen this before. "She's an adult, sir. Maybe she just needed some space." That's what he said, as if vanishing without a word, without answering her phone was normal, as if I was overreacting. But I wasn't. I knew something was wrong. By the morning of the third day, I hadn't slept. My phone sat on the coffee table, taunting me with its silence. I'd been cycling through all the usual thoughts: car accident, hospital, robbery gone wrong. But every time I chased one of those ideas to the end, it didn't quite fit. Something didn't add up. My gut kept screaming at me that this wasn't random, that Emily's disappearance had intent behind it. And then around 9:15 that morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her, just 2 words: "I'm okay." No explanation, no apology, no answer to my frantic dozen texts asking where she was, just "I'm okay." Something inside me snapped. I wanted to believe it, wanted to feel relief, but all I felt was rage, boiling under my skin. Who disappears for 3 days and then just says "I'm okay"? I called her immediately, and for the first time since she'd left, she actually picked up. Her voice was calm, too calm. She said she'd needed time to think, that she was overwhelmed. She told me not to worry, that she'd be home soon. She didn't say where she'd been, who she'd been with, why she hadn't answered me. It was like trying to grab smoke with my bare hands. Every time I thought I was close to an answer, she slipped away. She came back that evening. I'll never forget the sound of the key turning in the lock, the way the door creaked open like nothing had happened. She walked in wearing jeans and a gray sweater I didn't recognize, her hair tied up in a messy bun, and carrying a small overnight bag. No luggage, no suitcase, just that one little bag. I stood up so fast from the couch I nearly knocked over the coffee table. My heart was pounding as I looked at her, waiting, hoping for her to explain, but she didn't. She just set her bag down, looked at me, and said, "Can we not do this right now? I'm exhausted." And that's when it hit me like a truck. She wasn't scared, she wasn't shaken or apologetic, she wasn't acting like someone who'd been in danger, who'd just survived some accident or ordeal. She was acting like someone who'd been exactly where she wanted to be. That night I barely spoke. I watched her move around the apartment like nothing was wrong. She took a shower, ordered Thai food, curled up on the couch with Netflix, and fell asleep halfway through an episode of The Crown. Meanwhile, I sat there in silence, my stomach twisting into knots, my mind replaying every red flag I'd ignored for the past year. And then while she slept, I made a decision. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt, no matter what it was. I couldn't keep living in this fog of half answers and excuses, so I waited until her breathing evened out, until I was sure she was asleep, and I picked up her phone. She'd changed the passcode a few months earlier, but I'd memorized the way her fingers moved when she typed it in. It only took me 3 tries. The floodgates opened. The first thing I checked was her messages. Nothing unusual, just group chats with coworkers, texts with her mom. But then I noticed a hidden folder in her Instagram DMs, the one where messages from people you don't follow get stored. And there it was, a thread with someone named Ryan. The first message I opened nearly knocked the air out of my lungs. It was a photo, not explicit, but intimate. Emily and this guy, smiling together at a bar I didn't recognize, his arm around her shoulders, her leaning into him, both of them looking far too comfortable. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the messages. They went back conversations about meeting up, about missing each other, about the things she couldn't tell me. There were hotel reservations, little inside jokes, and words that cut me deeper than I thought possible. Things like "you make me feel alive again," and "I don't know how much longer I can keep this secret." I felt my whole body go cold. Every suspicion I'd buried, every doubt I'd silenced, it all came crashing down on me. She hadn't been working late. She hadn't been on work trips. She hadn't been visiting friends. She'd been with him, for months, maybe longer. And those 3 days she disappeared. The messages told me exactly where she'd been, a cabin in Wisconsin, with him. I remember sitting there on the edge of the bed, staring at that glowing screen, hearing the soft sound of Emily's breathing beside me, and feeling like my entire life had been ripped apart in an instant. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. My chest hurt, like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to wake her up, scream, demand answers, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I just sat there in silence, scrolling through proof after proof of her betrayal, feeling like I was dying inside. And then came the worst part. I found a video, a short clip she'd sent him. She was in the cabin, smiling into the camera, saying she wished they never had to leave. Her hair was down, her eyes were sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in years, and the way she looked at the camera, it wasn't the way she looked at me anymore. That's when I realized it wasn't just an affair, it wasn't just physical. She loved him, or at least she thought she did. The phone slipped out of my hands and landed on the carpet with a dull thud. I buried my face in my palms and felt hot tears burn down my cheeks. I couldn't stop shaking. My entire marriage, every memory, every promise, it all felt like a lie. By morning I wasn't the same person anymore. Something inside me had broken, and I knew it could never be put back together the same way again. That day, I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I watched her like a stranger, studying every move she made, the way she poured her coffee, the way she tied her hair back, the way she smiled faintly at a notification on her phone. Every little thing she did felt like evidence in a case I was building in my head. I kept asking myself, do I tell her I know? Do I throw her stuff out? Do I call Ryan? Do I tell her parents? But no matter what scenario I imagined, they all ended the same way, with me losing her. And maybe that's what terrified me most. Not just the betrayal, but the emptiness of what came after. Because the truth wasn't just that Emily had disappeared for 3 days. The truth was that she had disappeared from me a long time ago, and I'd been too blind to see it. That realization broke me more than anything else. The morning after I discovered the messages, the apartment felt different. It wasn't just the sunlight spilling through the blinds, or the faint chill from the drafty windows. It was me. Something inside me had cracked wide open, and every sound, every movement seemed amplified, like I was living in a world I no longer belonged to. Emily shuffled out of the bedroom in her slippers, hair still damp from her shower, humming under her breath like she always did. She smiled faintly at me when she reached for the coffee pot, and for a split second, I almost smiled back. Muscle memory, I guess. But then the memory of that video flashed in my head, her laughing in that cabin, whispering words of love to someone else, and my stomach turned. I had to leave the room. I mumbled something about taking a walk, grabbed my jacket and headed out into the freezing Chicago morning. It was January 18th, 2021, a Monday, the kind of day when the city feels like it's waking up too slowly, people trudging through snow with coffee cups in hand, bundled up against the biting wind coming off Lake Michigan. Normally those sights made me feel connected to something bigger, like we were all trudging through life together. But that morning I felt utterly alone. Every couple I saw made me sick. Every laugh, every casual touch between strangers felt like a personal insult. I ended up on a bench near Lincoln Park Zoo, staring at the frozen pond where geese stood on the ice like little sentinels. My breath fogged up in front of me as I tried to process what I'd seen on her phone. The betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It wasn't paranoia or insecurity. It was real, tangible, undeniable. And the worst part, I couldn't tell anyone. I thought about calling my best friend Mark. He'd known Emily almost as long as I had even toasted us at our wedding with some corny speech about lifelong love. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud, to admit it, because once I did, it wouldn't just be a secret between me and Emily, it would be real in the eyes of everyone else too, and I wasn't ready for that. So instead, I went back home. The rest of that week passed in a work became impossible. I logged into Zoom meetings, nodded at my boss, pretended to take notes, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was her texting him. Every time she laughed at something on her screen, I felt like my insides were being shredded. I started noticing the smallest things, her spending longer in the bathroom, her sudden bursts of energy after a day of being moody, the way she guarded her phone like it was a loaded gun. At night I'd lie awake while she slept beside me, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, and wonder how many nights she'd already given to him, how many smiles, how many touches, how many secrets that were never mine. Sleep became impossible. Food lost all I dropped nearly 10 pounds in 2 weeks without even trying. My coworkers started asking if I was okay. Mark texted me late one night. "Man, you seem off lately. Everything good?" I typed out a long reply, everything from the missing days to the Instagram messages, but deleted it before sending. I just sent back, "Yeah, just stressed. Work stuff," because admitting it out loud meant admitting that my marriage was collapsing, and I wasn't ready to face that reality. Instead, I tried to fix it in my own desperate way. I planned dinners, I suggested date nights, I even surprised Emily with tickets to a socially distanced comedy show downtown, thinking maybe if we laughed together, if we reconnected, I could bring her back to me. For a moment I thought it worked. She laughed. She held my hand. She even leaned her head on my shoulder during the show, and for those 2 hours I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could salvage what we had. But when we got home, she went straight to the bedroom, shut the door and spent an hour on her phone. When she came out, her eyes were glowing in a way they hadn't during the entire night with me. That's when it really hit me. I was competing with a girl, not just a man named Ryan, but the version of Emily she became with him, and that was a fight I couldn't win. The breaking point came on February 3rd. I remember the date because it was snowing so hard the city nearly shut down. Streets buried in white, cars abandoned along the side of the road, the kind of storm that makes you feel trapped no matter where you are. Emily was pacing the apartment, restless, snapping at little things, the Wi-Fi dropping, the heat taking too long to kick in, the delivery driver being late. I asked her what was wrong, and she exploded, said she felt suffocated, said she needed space, said she couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I wanted to scream back, to throw her phone at her, and demand she explain all the messages, the cabin, the lies, but instead I just froze. My voice came out quiet, almost pleading, as I asked, "Is there someone else?" She didn't answer, she didn't deny it, she just looked at me with this expression I'll never forget, half pity, half guilt, and in that silence I knew. That night, I drank for the first time in months. Whiskey, straight from the bottle, sitting in the dark living room, while the snowstorm howled outside. I thought about leaving, about packing a bag and walking out, but where would I go? My parents lived hours away in Indiana, and I couldn't bring myself to show up at their door a broken man. So I sat there, letting the alcohol burn my throat, tears streaming down my face, wondering how the hell my life had ended up here. The fallout wasn't just emotional, it was practical too. Bills piled up because I forgot to pay them. Work performance tanked, and my boss sent me a stern email about slipping focus. Friends drifted away because I kept canceling plans. My world shrank down to 4 walls, and the constant hum of betrayal in my ears. And through it all, Emily kept living her double life. Sometimes she'd be affectionate, cooking dinner or asking about my day. Other times, she was distant, her eyes glued to her phone, her smile reserved for someone else. It was like living with 2 Emilys, the one I married and the one I'd never truly known.
By late February, I'd stopped trying to fix things. I stopped planning dinners, stopped asking questions, stopped pretending. We lived like roommates who occasionally crossed paths in the hall. The silence between us was deafening, broken only by the sound of her typing on her phone, or the faint buzz of notifications that I knew weren't from me. My breaking point came on March. I woke up that morning, looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, and barely recognized the man staring back. Hollow eyes, unshaven face, shoulders slumped like the weight of the world was pressing down on them. And for the first time I thought, I can't do this anymore. But even then, I didn't confront her. Not yet, because some twisted part of me still clung to hope, still prayed that she'd come back to me, still feared what would happen if I forced the truth into the light. Instead, I sank deeper into myself. Work, sleep, whiskey, repeat. My life became a loop of survival, not living, and yet through all the pain there was this tiny ember inside me that refused to die, a part of me that whispered late at night, "You deserve better, you deserve the truth." That ember would eventually become the fire that pushed me to act. But in those months, in that fallout, I was just ashes, burned out, broken and barely holding on.
March bled into April like a long grey blur. Chicago winters have this way of grinding people down, of making even the strongest souls feel small beneath the endless slate sky and the bitter wind whipping off the lake. Normally, by April, I'd be itching for spring, for Wrigleyville opening up again, for the streets buzzing with patio seating and Cubs fans in blue jerseys spilling out of bars. But that year, 2021, I barely noticed the shift. The world outside could have been on fire, and I wouldn't have cared. Emily and I lived like ghosts haunting the same condo. We passed each other in the hallway, exchanged small talk about groceries or bills, but never touched the deeper stuff. It was almost worse than fighting. At least in a fight, there's passion, something worth burning for. But what we had was silence, punctuated by the soft clicks of her phone screen, lighting up in the dark when she thought I was asleep. But that ember inside me, the one I mentioned before, that tiny voice whispering, "I deserved better," finally started to grow. It wasn't overnight, it was gradual, like water dripping onto stone until eventually, a crack forms. The crack for me came one afternoon in mid-April when I was working from home. I'd muted myself on a Zoom meeting, staring blankly at the PowerPoint my co-worker was presenting, when I heard Emily laughing in the bedroom. Not just a casual chuckle, one of those deep belly laughs that made her eyes crinkle at the edges, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months, maybe even years. And it wasn't for me. That realization hit me like a sucker punch. I sat there staring at the muted faces of my co-workers and thought, why am I letting her do this to me? Why am I letting her live a double life while I rot away in silence? That was the day I decided I wasn't going to be passive anymore. The first thing I did was buy a burner phone. It felt shady as hell, like I was starring in some low-budget spy movie, but I didn't care. I wanted to know the truth in detail, to strip away the last shreds of doubt. Using the burner, I created a fake Instagram account. Generic, believable, someone she wouldn't think twice about. And sure enough, within a week I found Ryan's profile. His page was set to private, but his profile picture told me plenty. He was exactly the type Emily used to make fun of when we were dating. Gym selfies, designer sunglasses, the kind of smug half-smile that screamed, "I think I'm better than you." A marketing executive, according to his bio, which suddenly made Emily's work trips make a lot more sense. I wanted to punch his face through the screen, but instead I got smarter. I started small, liking a few photos, dropping harmless comments from the fake account. He didn't bite at first, but eventually curiosity won, and he followed me back. That gave me access to his posts, and within minutes my heart sank. There she was, Emily in the background of a group photo at some rooftop bar in River North. Emily, blurry but unmistakable, sitting next to him at a Cubs game. Emily smiling in a selfie he'd taken at that damn cabin in Wisconsin. She wasn't hiding, she was just hiding from me. That night, as I scrolled through photo after photo, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The shock was gone, the tears were gone. What replaced them was something sharper, colder, resolve. If she wanted to lie to build a secret life with this clown, then fine, but I wasn't going to be her fool anymore. The first step was gathering proof. I went full detective, screenshots of messages, saving posts, even tracking her location when she went to yoga, but ended up across town near Ryan's high-rise apartment. I built a folder on my laptop labeled insurance. It felt dirty, but it also felt empowering, like for the first time in months, I had some control. But control is a tricky thing. It tempts you to go further, and I did. I started noticing patterns. The way she'd always leave around the same time on Thursday evening, the sudden late-night brainstorming sessions her firm supposedly had. I checked her calendar when she wasn't looking, and sure enough, there were holes big enough to drive a truck through. One Thursday, I followed her. It felt insane, sitting in my car a block away watching her get into an Uber in her black pea coat, her hair carefully curled. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I tailed the Uber all the way downtown, my palms sweating on the steering wheel, until it pulled up outside a trendy restaurant I'd never been to. And there he was, Ryan, waiting for her at the door, bouquet of flowers in. She lit up when she saw him, eyes sparkling, cheeks flushed, like a teenager on her first date. I watched them embrace, watched him kiss her forehead, watched her slip her arm into his like they were the stars of some romantic movie. And I sat there in my car, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white, and thought, she was mine, she promised me forever, and now she's his. That night broke me, but it also solidified my plan. I wasn't going to scream or beg or throw plates against the wall. No, I was going to take back the narrative. Over the next 2 weeks I prepared. I spoke with a divorce lawyer quietly, gathering information. Illinois law wasn't exactly on my side when it came to infidelity, but I learned enough to know that documentation mattered. The folder on my laptop grew thicker with evidence, but revenge started whispering in my ear too. It came late at night when I'd scroll through Ryan's LinkedIn profile and see his smug face attached to his company's marketing team. I thought about sending the screenshots to his boss. I thought about sending them to his mother, who I found on Facebook posting photos of church bake sales. I thought about burning their little fantasy world to the ground. But then I'd look at Emily sleeping beside me, her face relaxed and innocent in the glow of the streetlight through the blinds, and I'd hesitate. Was I really that man now? The man who plotted in the shadows? The moral conflict ate at me. On one hand, I wanted justice. I wanted them to feel an ounce of the pain they'd inflicted on me. On the other hand, I wanted to walk away with my dignity intact, to not let them drag me down to their level. That tug of war nearly drove me mad, until May 8th. That day Emily told me she had another work trip. I nodded, pretending to believe her, but inside I was boiling. She left with her little overnight bag, kissed me on the cheek like she always did, and walked out the door. I waited an hour, then pulled up the tracker I'd quietly installed on her phone. She wasn't heading to Ohio. She was heading north, Wisconsin again. That was it, the final straw. I packed a bag of my own and got in the car. I drove for hours, fueled by adrenaline and coffee, until I pulled up near the same cabin I'd seen in the video months earlier. It was nestled among pine trees, smoke curling from the chimney, warm light spilling from the windows, and inside, through the crack in the curtains, I saw them, Emily and Ryan sitting by the fire, wine glasses in hand, her head resting on his shoulder. For a moment I thought about storming in, about dragging her out, about screaming until my throat bled, but I didn't. Instead I stood there in the cold night air, my breath fogging up, my heart pounding, and I took out my phone. I snapped photo after photo documenting the scene, final, undeniable proof. Then I turned and walked back to my car. As I drove away I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was clarity. The woman in that cabin wasn't my wife anymore, not really. She'd been gone for a long time, and if she could disappear from me, then maybe it was time I disappeared from her. I used to think that the hardest part of my life would be losing someone I loved, but the truth is, the hardest part was realizing they were never really mine to begin with. That thought, raw and brutal as it was, became my strange kind of freedom. By the time the divorce papers were signed in late January 2022, a little over a year after my wife's 3-day disappearance, I wasn't the same man who had sat alone in that kitchen staring at his cold coffee. I was thinner, older in the face, sharper in the eyes, but in a way I was more alive than I'd been in years. It's odd,
the way life folds into itself. That winter, after everything was finalized, I would wake up in the apartment I'd rented downtown and just stand by the window watching the world go by. The hum of traffic, the smell of wet pavement, the faint glow of neon signs from the 7-Eleven across the street. It all felt strangely comforting. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to guess where she was, who she was with, or why she had lied. The silence was mine again, and even though it was heavy, it was honest. But let me be clear, resolution isn't some clean ending wrapped in a bow. It's messy, it's quiet, it's the long, slow process of learning to breathe without flinching. For months after she left, I would still catch myself checking my phone late at night, half expecting her name to pop up. There were times I'd pass by the Italian restaurant we used to go to every Friday and feel my chest tighten, until I couldn't swallow. Sometimes I even thought I saw her walking down the street, slipping into a cafe, standing on the subway platform. My heart would lurch, my breath would stop, and then I'd realize it wasn't her at all, just another stranger with the same dark hair, the same tired eyes. Grief plays tricks on you like that. It makes ghosts out of the living. I started therapy in February, mostly because my sister practically begged me to. She had seen me wasting away, hiding in my apartment, living off frozen dinners and whiskey. At first I resisted. The thought of opening up to yet another person, a stranger this time, felt exhausting. But on the first day, sitting across from a woman named Dr. Patel, I broke down in a way I hadn't even allowed myself to when she first disappeared. I told her everything, how the marriage had been fraying for years, how the lies chipped away at me, how the discovery of the hotel receipt had shattered whatever was left. I told her about the 3 days of silence, the excuses, the look in her eyes when she admitted the truth without actually saying it. I told her how I had screamed into my pillow the night I realized she wasn't coming back, how I had wandered the streets like a ghost myself, wondering if it was worth it to keep going. Dr. Patel just listened. Sometimes she asked questions, but mostly she let me untangle the knots myself. And slowly, week by week, I began to understand that what broke me wasn't just her betrayal, it was the way I had abandoned myself long before she ever did. It's not easy to admit that. I had let my identity shrink down to her husband. Every decision I made, every compromise, every quieting of my own voice was for her, or for the image of us. I thought that was love. But real love doesn't erase you, it doesn't make you small. By spring I had started to rebuild. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't dramatic, it was just slow. I picked up running again, something I hadn't done since college. I bought a pair of worn-out Nike shoes from a thrift shop, and started jogging along the Hudson River, my breath ragged, my chest burning. But with each mile I felt a little more like myself. I started cooking again too, real meals, not just microwave dinners. I'd make simple pasta dishes, roast vegetables, even tried baking bread once. It came out lopsided and dense, but I ate it anyway, laughing to myself in the quiet kitchen. And somewhere in the middle of all that ordinary living, the weight began to lift. There were still setbacks, nights where the loneliness pressed in so heavy I thought it would crush me, days where a random song on the radio would send me spiraling back into old memories. One evening in May, I found an old birthday card from her tucked in the back of a drawer, her handwriting looping across the page with words like forever and always. I sat on the floor and stared at it for a long time, feeling that old ache pulse through me. But instead of breaking down, I folded the card, placed it back in the drawer, and whispered to myself, that was then, this is now. By summer I had started going out again. Friends dragged me to rooftop bars, to baseball games, to barbecues in Brooklyn. At first I felt like an imposter, standing there with a drink in my hand while everyone laughed and swapped stories. But little by little I found myself joining in. I laughed again, real laughter that didn't feel forced. I even went on a couple of dates, though nothing serious, just conversations over coffee, shared smiles, and the quiet realization that maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought. The real turning point came in late August, nearly a year after the betrayal. I was at a small outdoor concert in Central Park, the kind where people sit on blankets with cheap wine, and just let the music wash over them. The air was warm, the sky painted with streaks of orange and pink, and I remember lying back on the grass, listening to some indie band strum their guitars. When it hit me, I felt okay, not ecstatic, not healed in some grand cinematic way, just okay. And for the first time in a long time, okay was enough. I've thought a lot about forgiveness since then. People always say you should forgive, that it's the only way to move on, But I don't think that's true. Not in the way they mean it. I never forgave her. Not really. What she did was cruel, and it left scars that will probably never fully fade. But I forgave myself. I forgave myself for staying too long, for ignoring the red flags, for loving someone who couldn't love me back in the same way. And that in the end, was the forgiveness that mattered. I don't know where she is now. Last I heard, she had moved to Seattle with him. A friend mentioned seeing photos of them on Instagram, smiling, traveling, playing house like nothing had ever happened. For a long time, just the thought of that would have destroyed me. But now I just shrug. Let her have her story. I have mine. And my story didn't end with her betrayal. It began there. Looking back, I realized those 3 days she disappeared were like a twisted kind of gift. They forced me to wake up, to see the truth I'd been too afraid to face. They broke me, yes, but they also stripped everything down to the bone. And from there, I got to rebuild, not as her husband, not as half of a broken marriage, but as myself. I still carry the pain. I still have nights where I wonder what might have been if things had gone differently. But I also carry strength I never knew I had. I carry the knowledge that I survived the kind of heartbreak that once felt unsurvivable. And maybe that's what resolution really is. Not forgetting, not pretending it didn't happen, but standing in the wreckage, looking around, and realizing you can still move forward. I remember something Dr. Patel said once during one of our sessions. She told me healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about weaving it into your story in a way that doesn't control you anymore. At the time it sounded like therapy speak, something meant to comfort me. But now, 2 years later, I understand. My wife's betrayal is part of my story, but it isn't the whole story. It's just one chapter. The rest is still being written. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes the people who break us the most also set us free.